Well, we made this possible for the sound system to work, which is actually kind of the theme of today, is making the impossible possible. I don't like the word impossible because I find that people use it too often and it's kind of too easy. It's easy to say that things are impossible because you don't have either the creativity or the energy to make things possible. And the other reason I don't like the word impossible is because this word takes the focus off ourselves and sometimes puts too much focus on the things around us, as if making things happen simply happen by themselves without a lot of creativity and energy and focus needed on our behalf. So when we say things are impossible, we are kind of saying that somehow objectively they can't be done. I was at a restaurant once with somebody and he ordered an impossible burger. And they gave him this little flag and put it on his burger. I kept it because I've saved this in my office, but I put it upside down. So when you come to my office, you'll see this, but it's upside down to remind me that, and to remind all of us, that the impossible needs to be made possible. The reason this is so important is that the Gospels are all about making the impossible possible. We noticed in today's Gospel how when Jesus saw the weeping of those who had lost a child, he stopped their weeping. They were on their way to the cemetery to bury, and what seemed to be impossible was made possible. Let's look at this theme a little bit in our life. It's very important to interact and to engage the Gospels with our day-to-day life. Not just see the Gospel stories as something that happened in the past, but how do these themes interact with what's happening in our life today, what is happening in our larger picture of what we want to do, and to be able to see examples of things in our life where what seemed to be impossible became possible. I'll leave that for all of you to discuss tonight, and to especially discuss how what you thought could not possibly happen was done either through the encouragement of somebody or through your faith through prayer. I have many examples of this. I think my life is full of this theme, and that's why I love it so much. But I want to give you a kind of a funny story, or a story that happened to me a few years ago. When my mother called me and she said, I decided with your aunts that we want to go to Europe. I said, perfect. Let's go to Rome. And when you think of Rome, what's the first thing you think of? Pasta, pizza, and of course the Pope. So I began to work on our trip to Rome. And I also realized that somebody in our parish, Nohad, you might know her. She appeared in the papers a few times. She had done a bus. She had worked on, Nohad had worked on a bronze bust. This is not quite bronze, but it was a replica. She had worked on a bronze bust of Pope John Paul II. And she had asked me something that seemed rather impossible. How can we give this bust to the Pope? Or how can we take this to the Vatican? So I thought, perfect story. We're going to the Vatican, and Nohad wants to give this bust to the Vatican, to the Pope or to somebody in the Vatican. So I jumped into action, and I realized that pasta and pizza are much easier than actually seeing the Pope. And for those who have gone to Rome, you realize that there are various stages of getting near the Pope. You can actually see the Pope from a distance. You can get a little closer, or you can try to figure out how to get a private audience. Of course, me being the impossible to possible kind of guy, I figured, let's go for the big one. Let's figure out how I can actually spend some quality time with the Pope. Not that he has nothing better to do than spend time with me, but that was my goal. My goal was the big one. So I did some research, I made some contacts, and I realized that among the 200,000 people who visit and have their Wednesday audience with the Pope, there's a special section, the VIP section. So I was able to get into that VIP section with my aunts and my mother, which gets you to around 50 feet of the Pope. And after that, nobody knows what happens because the Pope's security details are never revealed. So when you're there, sometimes you have a chance to see the Pope and sometimes you don't. So as we were preparing for the arrival of the Pope, I also tried to understand the situation because it gets very complicated. So I talked to some of the security guards. I said, we have this bust, bronze, that we carried on the plane, and we want to hand deliver it to the Pope. The security guards looked at us. They didn't just say no. They gave us one of those looks. And he started shaking his head. Impossible, impossible. That's when the impossible to possible triggered in my head, and I saw a few other security guards, and I went around to try to get into the area, the VIP of the VIP, and all of them said the same thing. Impossible. Finally, I looked around and I was navigating to figure out how it's actually possible to see the Pope. And then the turning point came when I saw the Pope actually spending time with people. I said, who are these people that the Pope is spending time with? Well, the Pope spends time with those who have special needs, those who are handicapped, those who have really special needs. And then I realized, you know what? Maybe that was my gift. Maybe my gift was to see the Pope and think of what was possible despite not being able to give him this gift personally. And then I looked over at the stage after the audience and I saw a pile of all the gifts that the Pope had received. Everything from flowers to statues to cookies and all sorts of things like that. And then I thought, well, it was impossible to hand that gift to the Pope, but what is possible? The reason I give you this long story is that it's very important to think of all the roadblocks that get into our way that help us to see that little steps of impossibility actually open up other steps that make things possible. So once again, I got on the phone, made some contacts, and got into touch with Cardinal Leonardo Sandri, who is the head of the Congregation for Eastern Churches. And I thought, even if we had given this gift to the Pope, it would get lost in many other gifts that he got. Let's try to make this gift special. So we went and we got an appointment, a meeting with the head of the Congregation for Eastern Churches, and we said, on behalf of Holy Cross Church, on behalf of Nohad and her hard work, this is a gift to the Congregation for the Eastern Catholic Churches. The point with all this is that if we had stopped at this crazy idea of even going to Rome, even getting anywhere near the Pope, even trying to give a gift to the Pope, if we had just sat down and realized how crazy that idea was, we would have stayed at home. If we had gone to the general audience and had been among the 200,000, we wouldn't have even had a possibility to get close and even a possibility of having the Pope pass by us. We would have not even have gone there. We would have just gone to pizza and spaghetti instead. However, there are these layers of impossibilities that we kept on going beyond and beyond and beyond until finally we realized that what we had actually wanted, which ended up being not possible, but amidst that, what was not possible, we found something even greater, I think, which was possible. Because now that bust of Pope John Paul is in a place where we know where it is. It's not in some closet in the Vatican that nobody knows where it is and nobody can see it. That for me was one of the many examples in my life of changing the impossible to the possible. And when I look at the Gospels, I see things like this all the time. And perhaps the reason I feel so strongly about changing the impossible into the possible is because I see the life of Jesus. Right from the beginning, is it possible for God to love us so much, to want to be one of us? Not really, but God made it possible. Is it possible that the God who created the heavens and the earth was born in a cradle at a manger and lived among us in a very humble way? Not really, but God made it possible. Is it possible that God, who has so much to say, spent 30 years in quiet and silence, meditating, praying, preparing himself for his public ministry? Not necessary and not even possible, but God made it possible. And in addition to that, when Jesus launched his life, his ministry, almost everything he did was impossible. And this is the gospel that we focused on today. The focus of today's gospel was that Jesus didn't just pass by the needs of others. He didn't just see the widow's son being carried to the cemetery and said, you know what? It's impossible for life to be given him. He saw what was impossible, and he showed them that he made the impossible possible, and he also showed them who he was as the author of life, as the giver of life, as the giver of hope, as the giver of faith, as the giver of love, as the giver of everything that we may not think is possible. When you look at the Gospels and you look at the life of Jesus, you see a parallel of things around him that are happening that have to do with fear, with sadness, with despair, with discouragement. Does Jesus leave it there? No. He takes the fear, turns it into joy. He takes the sadness and he turns it into rejoicing. And in today's gospel, he takes death and turns it into life. Look at this gospel very closely. Notice all the nuances where Jesus tells those who are weeping to not weep, not simply because he's trying to be optimistic, have a good day, but he makes it possible for them not to weep by what he does. He makes the son, the only son of a mother, that's the words of the gospel, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and the large crowd from the city with her. He makes her only son, who became not a son because he died, he returns him to life for her. This is one of many examples, not only in my life, but in the life of the gospel, that shows us to focus not on what is impossible, but how things are possible with the help of Christ. Sometimes people think of faith as being blind. You may hear this phrase often, blind faith. All you need to do is close your eyes, don't listen, don't act, don't think, and just believe. Nothing could be further from the truth. The only way that we are able to move from the impossible to the possible through faith is because faith helps us to see a wider picture. When we are in every single difficulty that we are in, whether it be the death of a loved one, depression, discouragement, financial difficulties, why do we get discouraged? Why do we get depressed? Why do we get paralyzed? Because we are focusing only on what did not happen. However, faith helps us realize that God, who is with us, has the power over all things. And therefore, faith allows us to step back, take a step or two back from our situation and see the wider context and to look up and to realize that God is not only seeing my problem, he is seeing my problem in context of absolutely everything else that he has done for humanity. And within that context, what I am going through can be changed from the impossible to the possible. This is our life of faith that is living, that is alive, that is not blind, but that is beyond just what is visible and whatever it is we are feeling today. The reason we change the impossible to the possible is because we are able to move from the here, the now, for me, and our limited situation, to believing in God, who is able to do more than I can possibly imagine. When we are stuck in the impossible, we realize that we are blind and we are dead. However, when we turn to Christ and reflect on this gospel, we realize that the mourning of those around Christ was turned into rejoicing because he made possible what seemed impossible to absolutely everyone else around him.